Will Andrew Scheer Ruin Canada by Bruce Livesey, in Analysis, October 2nd, 2019. This is number 53 of 61 articles from the Special Report Election 2019. Standing in a forest of ash and birch trees about a 45-minute drive southwest of downtown Calgary, the Azu Ridge Estate Hotel is a luxury resort replete with fountains, waterfalls, grey stone facades, and exposed wooden beams. It is a popular wedding destination. In a conference room at this verdant retreat on April 11th, Conservative Party Andrew Scheer and his campaign manager, Hamish Marshall, were huddling with a group of oil company CEOs, along with Tim McMillan, president of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, Big Oil's most powerful lobby group. All of the CEOs present, in fact, are members of CAP's Board of Governors. One purpose of the meeting? To strategize how to defeat Justin Trudeau's government in the federal election this month. The agenda also included discussions on how to silence environmental critics of pipeline projects and the tar sands, including suing them in court. Scheer provided the keynote address, while Marshall spoke about rallying the base by using friendly interest groups. To some, this meeting at the Azu Ridge gave evidence that, guess what, things haven't really changed a whole lot, says Nathan Limpers, an Ottawa-based campaigner with Oil Change International, an advocacy organization that fights the fossil fuel sector. The Conservatives are still very cozy with oil industry interest in oil money. We've seen what's done to Alberta politics, and it was no different with federal politics under the Harper government. CAP disputes that the events itself were related to the election, but the fact that Andrew Scheer and his inner circle were scheming with oil industry executives to oust Trudeau comes as no surprise. After all, Scheer is widely acknowledged to be a creature of the house that Stephen Harper built, a party designed to serve the energy sector's interests at every turn. Indeed, among the Tories' key election planks is repealing the Liberals' consumer carbon tax, rusting up as many pipelines to the oil sands as possible, removing the ban on oil tankers off the coast of British Columbia, repealing Bill C-69, which limits how government projects are approved, and getting rid of the Liberals' new fuel standard. Meanwhile, the Federal Lobbyist Registry shows that since he became Tory leader in the summer of 2017, a battalion of oil industry lobbyists have trooped through Scheer's Ottawa office, including from energy companies such as Imperial Oil, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, Suncor, Irving Oil, BHP Battalion Canada, Husky Oil, TC Energy Corporation, Enbridge, ConocoPhillips, Syncrude, Cenovus Energy, and lobby groups like CAPP, the Pipeline Contractors Association, and the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. Does this suggest that the 40-year-old Scheer is merely a more genial version of Harper? He's a bit of an open book, muses Dwayne Bratt, a political scientist at Mountain Royal University in Calgary. Brad, in fact, believes Scheer was a placeholder leader. I don't think the Conservatives thought they were going to defeat Trudeau when they had the leadership race in 2017, he remarks. Scheer was the sort of compromise candidate who would last through the election, and then they would have another leadership race. Canadians do not know much about Scheer when he ran, and I'm not so sure if they know much about him right now. But since last winter, that political calculus has changed when the SNC-Lavalin and blackface scandal suddenly soured Trudeau's electoral prospects. Now Scheer has a very good chance of becoming Canada's next Prime Minister. But what does that mean? To some, not much, merely the continuation of the status quo. Alain Deneau, a sociologist at the Université de Moncton, explains that Canada has a two-party system whose ultimate purpose is to allow foreign and domestic corporations to extract the country's raw resources. The problem is that Canada, as such, has been governed like a colony since 1867, says Deneau. This is the problem. The idea is that the Conservatives propose a brutal relationship to power and the Liberals a smiley one, while our regime remains the same, a stable colony organizing the exploitation of raw materials by big corporations. Be that as it may, there's much about Scheer's agenda that should alarm Canadians. Andrew Scheer tweeted this: disturbing that this pedophile child killer might come to Canada. Apparently this isn't the first time this has come up. As Prime Minister, I won't let him come here. Where does Trudeau stand? Our country should not be a dumping ground for murderers, terrorists, and perverts. So this is from a post apparently from the Daily Mail UK. And the original tweet was Jamie Bulger, killer John Venables, to be freed within days and given money to move to Canada because it's cheaper than giving him a new life in Britain. Yeah, that can't possibly be true, because such murderers who have been on a sort of the British equivalent of like a witness protection program have been given different names and have been relocated within Britain. I can't imagine the British government giving them a passport. I can't imagine that any Commonwealth country would freely take them. I don't know why that's a thing. Scheer's close ties to rebel media and the alt-right. On September 1st, conservative gadfly Ezra Levant, head of the far-right online TV network Rebel Media, tweeted a question about whether Trudeau and Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland were actually inviting a convicted British child murderer to move to Canada to hide. Levant linked his tweet to an unsourced British tabloid story, citing that John Venables, who helped kill an infant when he was a boy in Northern England in 1993, was about to move to Canada. 2 hours after Levant tweeted, Scheer issued a tweet of his own, picking up on Levant's claim, saying it was disturbing that this pedophile child killer might come to Canada. As Prime Minister, I won't let him come here. Where does Trudeau stand? The problem was that none of this was true. Venables was not moving to Canada and would be barred from entry even if he tried. That Scheer was spreading unfounded rumors promoted by Levant is no shocker. After all, the Conservative Party was once thick as thieves with Rebel Media, a relationship which blew up spectacularly in the summer of 2017 when Levant's network became a favorite outlet for alt-right racists and anti-Semites, notably when white nationalist Faith Goldie and Gavin McInnes, founder of the far-right Proud Boys, who once posted a video of Rebel entitled 10 Things I Hate About Jews. Other Rebel highlights that year included Goldie's sympathetic coverage of neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, and spreading misinformation about who was responsible for the massacre of 6 Muslims at a Quebec City mosque. Scheer and most mainstream conservatives quickly cut ties to the network. Up until that fateful summer, Scheer had conducted 3 one-on-one interviews with Rebel, including one with Goldie in February 2017, who at that time hosted a show called On the Hunt. Yet Scheer could hardly claim ignorance in failing to recognize Rebel's racist white nationalist pedigree. Long before 2017, Levant had lost numerous libel lawsuits for defaming a wide range of people, especially for attacking visible minorities, Muslims, and prominent members of the Jewish community. He once claimed that billionaire financier George Soros had collaborated with the Nazis as a child. Moreover, the most important person stick-handling Scheer's political career is Hamish Marshall, his campaign manager. University of Toronto, an Oxford-educated strategist who worked in Stephen Harper's PMO. Marshall is considered the brains behind Scheer's rise to prominence. He's a super smart guy, says Warren Kinsella, a Toronto-based political consultant. He's a great numbers guy, a great data guy. He should not be underestimated. But Marshall also played a key role in establishing Rebel Media and keeping it financially afloat. Marshall worked with Levant back when Levant launched the Ethical Oil AstroTurf campaign to extol the virtues of the oil sands. Marshall's wife, by the way, Catherine, became Ethical Oil spokesperson. Marshall ran a communications company called Torch Agency, who wrote the source code for Rebel's website design. Marshall also helped develop Rebel's business model, and his name appears as a director for Rebel News Network Limited going back to 2016. He listed his business's address of that of Rebel headquarters in Toronto, from where he worked on Scheer's leadership campaign. The website's donations page and fundraising operation were also designed by Marshall's firm. This sort of flirtation with alt-right and bigoted sensibilities has been long part of Scheer's historical milieu. Born and raised in Ottawa, Scheer is the son of a nurse and a Roman Catholic deacon. What you have to remember about him is that he's a genuine person of faith, says Michael Corn, author, host, and former conservative political commentator. After graduating from Catholic high school, Scheer studied history at the University of Ottawa. By then, he was dabbling in conservative politics, including a campaign to merge the PC, that's the Progressive Conservatives, and Reform parties. In 2000, he ran as school trustee for the local Catholic school board. After he got married, Scheer moved to his wife's hometown, Regina, where he finished his undergrad degree. He worked briefly as an insurance clerk, which he later lied about, claiming he was an insurance broker. He was a waiter and at the office of the local Canadian Alliance MP. In 2004, at the age of 25, Scheer won a seat in the federal riding of Regina Coppell, beating veteran New Democratic Party MP Lauren Nystrom by a tiny margin. Scheer won due to the splitting of the vote between the Liberals and NDP. Scheer was not above playing dirty politics either. 3 days before Election Day, Scheer's campaign sent out a letter to voters accusing Nystrom of being soft on child pornography. Nystrom had made some remarks during a House of Commons debate on legislation designed to regulate pornography about artistic merit and freedom of expression, citing Vladimir Nabokov's 1955 novel Lolita as a prime example, but did not say anything about child pornography. It tells you about the character of Scheer, says Nystrom in an interview. Scheer has proven himself since as someone who lies constantly, took something and distorted it and lied about it. Once in Parliament, Scheer remained an obscure but loyal backbencher. Then, in 2008, he was named Deputy Speaker. 3 years later, he was elevated to Speaker of the House of Commons, the youngest person to hold the post. By all accounts, he was a good speaker, but by all accounts, the reason he was Speaker is because Harper didn't think he was good enough to be in his cabinet, remarks political scientist Dwayne Bratt. Still, Kinsella points out that in order to become Speaker, you must have support from every party in the House of Commons. My experience is that someone does not become Speaker by being a doctrinaire maniac, he says. Scheer was picked to be Speaker, and more than once by all of the political parties. So what is it about him that persuaded not just the Tories, but the Liberals and the New Democrats to vote for him? And to me, this is just part of his hidden strength. Indeed, Scheer evinces a genial, easygoing, even bland personality. When Jason Kenney announced that his big fight-back strategy at an energy conference in Calgary a year ago, recalls Bratt, Scheer was there, and even Conservatives were going, who is this guy? He showed up late, he left early, never worked the room, and people didn't pay attention when he spoke. I've made the comment that if you look at Conservative leaders across the country, Scheer is number 3. It's Jason Kenney, Doug Ford, and Scheer in that order. Still, Scheer's time as Speaker was not without issues. He was linked to the Tories' 2011 federal election voter suppression scandal, whereby the party tried to direct non-conservative voters to the wrong polling booths in ridings where the vote was close. Scheer was a client of Campaign Research, a firm linked to the scandal, and which had issued robocalls claiming that prominent Liberal MPs were stepping down. He was criticized by opposition MPs over his interventions during debates, that he was blocking questions raised about the scandal in Parliament. By the time the Conservatives lost in 2015, most of Harper's senior cabinet ministers were long gone. Moreover, with Trudeau's win, it was assumed that the Tories would be out of power for at least 2 terms. In September 2016, Scheer announced his bid for the party's leadership, saying he had the support of 32 members of the Conservative caucus. Hamish Marshall ran his campaign. No one, including Andrew Scheer, thought he would be the leader of the party, says Corn. He won on the 13th ballot with less than 1% of the vote, became anyone but Maxime Bernier, and suddenly here is Scheer, who's like a deer caught in the headlights. I mean, he really doesn't know what to do. Indeed, Scheer's introduction onto the national stage was tainted. At the 2017 Conservative Convention in Toronto, the vote tally between him and Bernier was so small, Bernier questioned the results. Fueling the fire was a mysterious discrepancy of 7,466 votes, and the party's chief returning officer ordering all of the ballots destroyed before a recount could happen. Bernier then accused Scheer of manipulating the vote by signing up fake Conservatives, temporary members in Quebec's organization by the Dairy Lobby. Bernier soon bolted the party. Since then, Scheer has revealed himself to be a clumsy and unpolished politician, even goofy at times. Although he's made a few missteps during his campaign based on what happened with the SNC-Lavalin scandal, you would think Scheer would be 8 points on Trudeau, remarks Bratt. At the fact that they are neck and neck has to be owned by Andrew Scheer. He's not been able to capitalize on the massive scandal. The party Scheer inherited is not the PC party of Robert Stanfield, Joe Clark, and Brian Mulroney. Under Harper, the Conservatives emerged more unrepentantly reactionary, ideological, and hardline. Red Toryism is dead, says Corn. It simply doesn't exist anymore. During Harper's reign, the Conservatives employed 4 tactics: allied themselves closely with big oil, tax cuts, especially for corporations, go to war with environmental, indigenous, and social justice groups, and embrace Islamophobia, anti-Arab bigotry. This meant ignoring or denying climate change, building pipelines, auditing environmental groups, and portraying Arabs as terrorists or less than civilized. This was seen in the treatment of Omar Khadr, who was accused of killing an American soldier during a firefight in Afghanistan at age 15. Khadr was detained at Guantanamo Bay by the Americans for 10 years, where he was often brutally tortured. Yet the Harper government fought hard to keep him first in American custody and then behind bars, despite the fact that a 2010 Supreme Court ruling found that his human rights were violated while in Guantanamo Bay. During the 2015 election, the Tories took a hardline position on Muslim headwear and vowed to set up a police hotline to report what it called barbaric cultural practices. Has Scheer adopted Harper's worldview? The short answer seems to be yes. A good example is climate change, which has been the central issue in this year's election campaign. For months, Scheer simply refused to issue a plan on how to respond to the global heating crisis. Finally, realizing that ignoring the issue wasn't working, Scheer unveiled a blueprint in June which he said would meet Canada's emissions reduction targets, but also allow for the elimination of federal consumer carbon tax. Conservatives fundamentally believe that you cannot tax your way to a cleaner environment, said Scheer. Instead, the answer lies in technology. Yet his plan was quickly condemned. Environmental economist David Sawyer, a fellow with Carleton University School of Public Policy, along with two colleagues, analyzed the Tory scheme and concluded in a report that it would increase emissions by 9.1 megatons in 2022, relative to the current and announced measures planned by the federal and provincial governments. The Tory climate plan costs more and raises emissions, says Sawyer in an interview with the National Observer. He points out that Scheer wants to reintroduce a home retrofitting plan that the Harper government cancelled after discovering it was both uneconomical and simply didn't work. You cannot subsidize enough retrofits to get to their emission numbers, says Sawyer, before concluding the Conservatives are deferring to the CAPP view of the world, grow investments in the oil sands. Indeed, Scheer has done everything possible to show himself as a true ally of big oil. Along with the premiers of New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario, he's taken up the cause of the cancelled Energy East pipeline that was proposed to carry oil from the tar sands all the way to New Brunswick. He suggested Canada is not energy independent, despite the fact that Canada has long been a net exporter of oil, only importing 1 barrel of crude for every 7.5 barrels it produces. In February, Scheer appeared at a United We Roll protest on Parliament Hill. A convoy of oil sands workers and supporters arrived in Ottawa from Alberta, yet the convoy had been roiled by controversy after initially being described as a yellow vest convoy after the French protesters who adopted yellow vests as a symbol of protest. The Canadian protesters changed the name after questions arose whether they'd also embrace anti-immigrant rhetoric. Indeed, among the people who addressed the rally in Ottawa was Goldie, yet Scheer was unrepentant about his precipitation. Scheer also refused to show up at any climate strike marches across the country on September 27, including Montreal, where the crowd was estimated at 500,000 people. Scheer has been guilty of insensitivity toward Muslims and Arabs. This past winter, when alt-right white supremacists entered 2 mosques in New Zealand and slaughtered 51 people, Scheer's initial statement of sympathy did not mention the attack was against Muslims or occurred at mosques. Then this past June, Scheer was forced to remove Tory MP Michael Cooper from his position on the Justice Committee after Cooper read an extract from the shooter's manifesto to Muslim witnesses testifying before the committee. Cooper was forced to apologize. This past August, the National Council of Canadian Muslims asked that Toronto area Conservative candidate Ghada Malik step down after she appeared to have once retweeted a post that blamed Detroit's economic hell on Islamist extremism. She also had voiced displeasure at an ad seeking tolerance for hijabs. In a Vice article, Malik was also accused of backing an expert who supported conversion therapy for LGBTQ people. Malik denied she supported conversion therapy and says she stands behind Muslim Canadians. Still, Malik's views were considered so controversial that Ontario's Tory party rejected her as a candidate in 2017. Scheer, on the other hand, has not removed her as a federal candidate. Scheer is anti-abortion and against same-sex marriage, but said a Conservative government would not reopen these issues. At a press conference in August, Scheer refused to tell reporters whether his own opinion on same-sex marriage has changed, since he made strong remarks about it back in 2005, as caught on video recording. In the House of Commons that year, debating a bill on same-sex marriage, Scheer asked at one point, "How many legs would a dog have if you counted the tail as a leg?" The answer is just 4. Just because you call a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. If this bill passes, governments and individual Canadians will be forced to call a tail a leg, nothing more. And once again, Scheer declined to participate in any pride parade, unlike Trudeau, May, and Singh. Bernier has walked in pride parades in the past. So what are the chances of Scheer's becoming Prime Minister? According to Kinsella, pretty damn good. Under Harper, the Conservative Party built an enormously effective fundraising operation and grassroots organizing apparatus, which gets their voters to the polls. More importantly, they developed the technology and messaging to reach key voters in key ridings who can sway elections. Kinsella says 2016 U.S. election and Brexit vote revealed that there's a good 5 to 6% of Conservative votes that hides from pollsters. And that's why I think that Scheer has got a real shot at winning and maybe even a majority, because this hidden Conservative constituency tends to be male, high school educated, maybe a college degree, and feels like societies have left them behind. That constituency exists in Canada too, and they hide from the polling industry, continues Kinsella. And you can see the Tories trying to devise ways to find them. There's this constituency who comes out on election day and changes the outcome. Indeed, Marshall is the sort of data wonk who understands how to reach these disaffected right-wing voters, people who may be key to putting his man in the Prime Minister's office. Says Kinsella, if you are the Conservative Party and you can identify and activate that 5 to 6%, then watch out.